So I've made a lot of progress on this airplane. I'm almost finished with it. So I got all the servo push rods connected and the control horns. Control horns are just plastic ID cards that I cut. Got all the wiring here nice and neat with a lot of zip ties. Over here on the fuselage, I've got the elevator control horns. It goes into the fuselage. I just heated up the wire with a lighter and then poked it through. Here's the two servos for the elevator and rudder. I glued in these popsicle sticks with these holes through it just to guide the wires through. And I've also got small coffee stirrer straws that the wire goes through. And then on the rudder push rod, I've got some popsicle sticks that are glued in here on the tail just to guide it in, keep it from flexing. Over here on the hatch, I glued in two pieces of foam on the bottom side that stick out just a little bit, so when the hatch goes in, it rests on those. So right now I'm printing out the little caps that'll go on the end of the landing gear wire to hold the wheels on. But I've been working on the landing gear wire. And so here's the nose gear wire, just a single wheel on this. It's just a bent piece of steel rod. It goes down into this 3D printed bracket that's glued into the foam, and then it bends around and pops back up. And I'm gonna end up gluing it in there with some Gorilla Glue. And then similarly, we have the two main gears. These ones are each gonna have two wheels on them, so there's gonna be one wheel on each side here. And it's just bent into this shape. And then this is a piece of heat shrink tube that I put on each one just to kind of hold them together. And then they're gonna each go into their own bracket, which is on the bottom of the engine nacelle and glued in as well. Alright, so I've got the wheels glued in now, or the landing gear wire. It's glued into the brackets on all three locations, and it seems really strong, so I think it should hold up pretty well. So as far as I can tell, this plane is pretty much done. There's nothing else to do physically to add on to it. So now I'm going to do a test of all the electronics, make sure that everything works properly. I'm going to make sure that the motors both work. I'm going to set up the motors with differential thrust, and I'm going to have that on a switch so I can turn it on for taxiing on the ground, since the nose wheel is not steerable. And then I'll have a switch where I can turn it off so that when I'm flying, only the rudder will work and not the differential thrust. Alright, so I've been programming all of the mixes and everything into this plane. So I'll go through everything and show you what I've got. First of all, I went through and trimmed all the control surfaces to be flush. And they're all flush with the wing root here. The elevator is even with the rest of the horizontal stabilizer, and same for the rudder. So the elevator's there, ailerons, and rudder. And then I've got the flaps programmed on this switch.
Flaps half, flaps full, flaps up.
It's got 3 settings for the flaps. And then I've also got various other things programmed in here.
0 volts.
That switch just tells the voltage of the battery. I have a telemetry sensor that'll be plugged into the balance port on the LiPo. And then if you flip it down,
6 volts.
that tells the receiver battery voltage, which gives me an indication of how well the BEC is working. If I notice that drop significantly during the first test flights, then I'll know that it's being overloaded by all the servos and everything. This switch,
81 dB, 84 dB.
that one displays the RSSI of the receiver. This is stuff that I'll have turned on during the first flight just to make sure everything's working properly. And then for the throttle arming, I have a special sequence that I have to go through to arm the aircraft. So the left stick won't do anything unless this sequence is done. First, you have to flip this switch up, and then flip that switch up, and make sure that the throttle is in 0 throttle. And that all has to be done within 1 second, otherwise it won't arm the throttle. So you can hear it didn't say throttle arm. That's because I waited too long to flip this switch up, so it has to be very quick.
Throttle active.
So now it says throttle active, so now the motors will work. I also have a thrust differential, so if I want to go right, you'll see the left motor turns on. If I want to go left, the right motor turns on, and that can be turned on and off with this switch here. So now when I'm flying, only the rudder works. But then when I'm on the ground taxiing, I can flip that switch down and have the thrust differential. So then when it's time to disarm the aircraft, you just flip this switch down.
Throttle hold.
No matter what, when this switch is flipped down, it'll disarm both motors. Here in the logical switches screen, you can see we have a logical switch 1, which just checks to see if this switch up here is flipped up or not. And you can see when I flip it up, it beeps, and that lights up for 1 second. And then we also have logical switch 2, which only turns on if logical switch 1 turns on, and switch SD is up, which is this one. So that's why flip that one up and then switch SD
Throttle
up.
active.
So then once a logical switch 2 turns on, it allows logical switch 4 to turn on. So L4 only turns on when L2 and L3 are on. So L3 is also checking to see that the throttle stick is in the full negative position. So if you move the throttle up a little bit,
Throttle hold.
now L3 is turned off. The final one, which is the sticky L5, and it only turns on when L4 and switch SD is not up. So say we accidentally want to arm the throttle with the throttle stick not in the full negative. You see L3 did not activate, which stopped the chain, so L5 did not get to it. So switch H, switch SD,
Throttle active.
make sure the throttle's down, and then the sticky turns on and it stays on until you flip switch SD back down. And then here in the special functions, if we look at special function 8 and 9, when L5 is not on, it'll automatically override channel 5 and 6, which are the 2 throttle channels, to negative 100, which makes them turn off. So then when you go through the proper arming sequence,
Throttle active.
you can see those turn off, and that allows the throttles to be controlled. They're not overridden anymore. I've also got it set up on here to alert me if the battery voltage falls below 14.7 volts. So you can see L7, if the battery voltage, which is the cell's telemetry sensor, less than 14.7 volts, it'll turn on L7. I added this section down here where it says greater than 1 volt because if you don't have the sensor connected to a LiPo, it'll just keep beeping the whole time. If L7 is on for more than 2 seconds, it'll just keep repeating the battery voltage. Well, that concludes the build for this plane. The next video should hopefully be the maiden flight. So thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, comment, check out the other build videos on this plane. And I've made many other planes using these same build techniques. So check those out too if you're interested.